It was the summer of 1876, deep in the Arizona territory. Kaya, the young Apache woman, lay alone in the desert, her body bruised and broken, abandoned by her own tribe. The heat of the desert sun burned her skin, but the coldness in her chest was far worse. Betrayed, alone. She could barely lift her head, each breath a struggle as her world narrowed to nothing but pain and fear. Just as the darkness threatened to take her, a shadow appeared on the horizon. Rico, a black cowboy, determined to save her or die trying. But would the past's hatred leave room for their survival, or would they be consumed by it? Before we continue, if you're watching this from anywhere in the world, leave your city name in the comments. I want to see how far this story travels. Rico Lacey had been riding through the desolate Arizona desert for hours, the sun burning high above him, when he spotted something unusual. A dark figure, crumpled and lifeless, sprawled in the dust. His horse, Dust Devil, slowed instinctively, the hooves crunching softly on the cracked earth as Rico's sharp eyes scanned the figure lying face down under the scorching heat. At first glance, he thought it was just another body left by the unforgiving land. It wasn't uncommon in these parts. Warriors, settlers, cattle rustlers, all succumbed to the desert's mercy in one way or another. But as he drew closer, something caught his eye. A tuft of long black hair, matted with blood. His stomach twisted. Apache. Rico's hand instinctively went to the rifle slung across his saddle. His father had drilled it into him since he was old enough to understand. Apaches were the enemy. The very thought of the people who had raided and killed settlers, leaving nothing but charred homes and grief, filled him with disdain. And here was one, a young woman by the looks of her, bleeding out under the desert sun. He had the gun in his hand now, the cool steel feeling heavy with the weight of old lessons. Everything in him screamed to finish it. He had been raised to think that the only good Apache was a dead one. He'd killed before, didn't think much of it, didn't feel anything. But this felt different. Rico's heart raced. His grip tightened around the rifle, then loosened, and he found himself pulling the reins of Dust Devil to a stop. The sight of the Apache girl's blood-soaked clothes, her breathing shallow and labored, froze him. His mind, torn between years of hatred and something deeper, something buried beneath the layers of bitterness, fought against itself. She groaned, a soft, desperate sound, like a final plea for mercy. That sound did something to him. It was human. He stepped off his horse, rifle still in hand, but his fingers trembling now. He knelt beside her, his breath hitching. Her face was streaked with dirt and blood, her lips cracked and dry. She couldn't have been older than 20. "You're not dead yet," Rico muttered, more to himself than to her, his voice cracked with uncertainty. A rare thing for him. He had been alone too long to feel the burden of another person's suffering. But something about this moment, this young girl lying broken in the dirt, pierced through him. Rico's mind raced. He couldn't leave her here. He shouldn't leave her here. But she was Apache. His father would never forgive him for this. Hell, the world would never forgive him for saving the life of someone who might be responsible for the death of his own kin. But then her hand twitched. Her fingers reached out, weakly grasping at the air. She needed him. The world seemed to freeze for a moment. Rico had seen death. He'd seen it in the eyes of cattle, in the eyes of men, and even in the sharp glint of a rifle. But he had never seen it like this. Never seen a person so fragile, so human, so desperate. He couldn't just leave her here to die. His heart pounded as he made a decision. "Damn it," he whispered. "I can't leave you here." Rico knelt down, his hands shaking as he pulled her into his arms. She was lighter than he expected, skin and bone, barely clinging to life. Her head lolled against his chest, her breath warm against his neck. She was alive, but barely. The sound of her breathing, shallow and ragged, struck something deep inside him. He had grown up believing in the strict lines of good and bad. But now, holding this Apache girl in his arms, those lines were blurring. She was just a girl, no different from any other lost soul in this unforgiving land. With a grunt, he stood, lifting her carefully onto his horse. Dust Devil snorted in protest, but he urged the mare forward. His eyes never left her face as he mounted up behind her, careful not to jostle her too much. As they rode away from the site of the battle, of the bloodshed, Rico's mind raced. This wasn't just a moment of mercy, no. This was something else. He was making a choice, one that would change everything. He wasn't sure what would come of it, but one thing was certain. He couldn't undo what he had just done. The sun dipped lower in the sky, and as the shadows grew longer, Rico Lacey realized that he had crossed a line. There was no turning back now, and for the first time in a long while, he wondered if that might be a good thing. Rico rode hard through the desert. Kaya still slumped in front of him, barely conscious. His heart pounded in his chest as Dust Devil picked her way across the rough terrain. Each time the mare stumbled, Rico gripped the reins tighter, cursing under his breath, praying that the girl would hold on. Kaya's breathing was shallow, her body too weak to stay upright on her own. She had not spoken a word since he'd lifted her onto the horse, her eyes fluttering occasionally, but always drifting back into the haze of unconsciousness. The silence between them was thick with the weight of what he had just done. Every few minutes, Rico glanced over his shoulder, half expecting to see Apache riders coming after them. Kyle and his band of warriors would be relentless, and Rico had no doubt that the decision to help Kaya had just sealed his fate. If they weren't already hunting him, they soon would be. He clenched his jaw, pushing away the fear creeping into his chest. He couldn't afford to think about the consequences. Not yet. The weight of Kaya in his arms felt heavier as the hours wore on. Her skin was hot to the touch, feverish, and Rico found himself cursing the sun for its unforgiving heat. He had no water, no supplies to speak of. And here he was, stuck in the middle of nowhere with an Apache girl who could barely stay alive. She stirred against him, a low moan escaping her lips. Rico shifted uncomfortably in the saddle, trying to find a way to make her more comfortable, but it was futile. There was nothing he could do but keep going. "Stay with me, girl," Rico muttered, his voice hoarse. "Just a little further." It was only when the sun began to set, casting long shadows over the desert, that Rico saw something. A small cluster of rocks ahead. A potential shelter. It wasn't much, but it was better than the open land they had been traveling. He kicked Dust Devil into a steady canter, praying they'd make it before nightfall. When they finally reached the rocks, Rico quickly dismounted and lowered Kaya carefully to the ground. She didn't respond, her body limp, her breathing still shallow. He wasn't sure how much longer she could hold on. He took a deep breath, trying to steady his nerves. There was no plan, no supplies, no help. Just him and the girl, stranded in the middle of a desert, with no way of knowing what would happen next. But then something shifted. Something about Kaya, lying there in front of him, stirred something deep within Rico. He couldn't explain it. She was his enemy, wasn't she? She was Apache, a part of the people who had raided and killed his own. Yet, as he watched her, so vulnerable and fragile, all he saw was a person who needed help, a person who had been left behind by the very people who should have protected her. He knelt beside her, pressing his hand gently to her forehead. Her fever was still raging, and her skin felt like it was burning. He cursed again, knowing there was nothing he could do to cool her down, nothing to offer her except his presence. For the first time since he'd found her, Rico felt a deep sense of guilt settle in his chest. What had he done? "I've never seen a woman so alone," he whispered, though he wasn't sure if she could hear him. "Not like this." He glanced around at the barren desert. The landscape stretched endlessly in every direction, offering no hope, no escape from the consequences of his actions. As night fell and the temperature dropped, Rico wrapped Kaya in his blanket, trying his best to shield her from the chill. He found some scrub and started a small fire, the flames dancing brightly in the night air. His hands shook as he poked at the fire, a million thoughts racing through his mind. What had he been thinking? Why hadn't he just left her there? Why had he saved her? But deep down he knew the answer. He couldn't leave her to die. He just couldn't. He sat back against a large rock, watching the fire flicker in front of him. Kaya lay a few feet away, her face still pale, her breathing faint but steady. In the stillness of the night, Rico realized just how alone he was. He had been raised to fight, to survive, to trust no one. But here, with this Apache girl who had been abandoned by her own people, he felt something different. Connection. He couldn't explain it, but he wasn't going to fight it. For the first time in a long while, Rico felt a spark of something other than survival. It was hope. Hope that maybe in helping her, he could find a way to heal, a way to bridge the gap between two worlds that had spent too long at war with one another. But that was a long way off. For now, he had to focus on keeping Kaya alive. He had to make sure she didn't die in the desert. As he settled beside her, his eyes heavy with exhaustion, Rico couldn't help but wonder what the future would hold. He had crossed a line, and there was no turning back now. The cold of the desert night settled in quickly, creeping into Rico's bones. He sat beside the fire, watching the flames flicker, his thoughts tangled like the smoke curling into the air. Kaya was still unconscious, her body trembling with fever, and Rico's mind raced as he tried to figure out his next move. The girl was Apache, the enemy. He'd been taught that from the moment he could walk. The Apache were raiders, thieves, killers. His father had made sure he knew it, along with every other man who worked the land in Arizona. Yet here he was, a black cowboy, caring for a wounded Apache girl. The very girl whose people had been responsible for countless deaths in his town. But in this moment, she wasn't a warrior. She was just a girl, fighting for her life. She didn't deserve this. No one deserved this. The wind howled across the desert, carrying with it a chill that cut through his coat. Rico huddled closer to the fire, casting a nervous glance over his shoulder. He'd been alone for so long, but now the weight of Kaya's presence, her desperate condition, felt like a heavy burden on his heart. And the silence between them? It was deafening. For a long time, Rico had lived by the idea that his actions were dictated by the land. That survival was all that mattered. But now, with Kaya's fragile body lying beside him, he began to wonder if there was more to life than simply surviving. He couldn't explain why, but this girl had broken through something in him. He felt connected to her in a way that didn't make sense. She was a stranger, a warrior from a tribe that had killed his people. Yet she was human, just like him, struggling to live. When he had pulled her from the desert, he hadn't known what would come of it. He still didn't. But in the dead of night, as the fire crackled and the stars glittered above them, Rico made a promise to himself. He wasn't going to let her die. He couldn't. Just as he was about to settle in for the night, Kaya's body shifted. Her lips parted, and she let out a small, pained groan. Rico's heart skipped a beat as he leaned closer, his hands gently brushing the hair from her face. "Hey, you're still with me," he murmured, his voice rough with exhaustion. Her eyelids fluttered, and for a moment, Rico thought she might be gone. But then her eyes cracked open, their dark pupils struggling to focus on him. Who are you?" Kaya rasped, her voice barely a whisper. Rico's breath hitched at the sound of her voice. It was the first time she had spoken since he found her, and though it was weak, it filled him with a sense of relief. I'm not gonna hurt you," he said, his voice surprisingly soft. "I'm Rico Lacey. You're safe now." Kaya's gaze flickered to his face, and he saw the hesitation in her eyes, the distrust. She had every reason to be afraid of him. He was a stranger to her, a man from a different world, and yet she was still here, still alive, because of him. "I should have died," Kaya muttered, her voice trembling with pain. "My people, they left me." Rico felt his chest tighten at her words. He didn't know what to say. She had been abandoned by her own people, her own family, and left to die in the desert. The realization hit him harder than any bullet ever could. "Don't talk like that," he said firmly, squeezing her shoulder lightly. "You're gonna be all right." But even as he said it, he wasn't so sure. Kaya's wounds were severe. He could see the blood caked on her clothes, the way her body trembled with the fever. She wasn't out of the woods yet. Rico stood and moved to grab his canteen, but his hand froze in midair as a distant sound reached his ears. Hoofbeats. His heart lurched into his throat. Apache. Kaya's eyes widened in fear, and Rico's grip tightened around the canteen. He could hear them now, men on horseback, approaching fast. He had no choice. He couldn't stay here. And he couldn't let Kaya fall into the hands of the Apache who would surely follow them. He quickly turned back to Kaya, his voice urgent. "I need you to hold on, all right? Just a little longer. We're gonna get out of here." With no time to waste, he gathered Kaya up in his arms once more. She winced in pain, but she didn't protest. It seemed the fight had gone out of her. She was too weak to argue, too weak to do anything but trust him. Rico mounted Dust Devil quickly, holding Kaya in front of him, her body heavy against his chest. His horse snorted in discomfort, but Rico urged her forward, steering them toward the nearby mountains. It was the only hope they had. As the sound of the Apache riders grew louder, Rico's pulse quickened. There was no time to lose. Every second counted. He couldn't afford to be caught out in the open. He rode faster, praying that the mountains would offer some form of shelter, something, anything, that could keep them safe for just one more night. The moon hung high over the desert, casting an eerie silver glow on the ground, as Rico and Kaya rode deeper into the jagged terrain of the Dragoon Mountains. The sounds of the Apache riders were distant now, but Rico couldn't shake the feeling of being hunted. The urgency in his heart grew with each step Dust Devil took, every muscle in his body straining to carry Kaya through the wilderness. Kaya, her face pale and drawn, had fallen silent again, her eyes closed as she rested against him. He could feel her body heat seeping into his chest, a reminder of just how fragile she was. Despite the comfort he tried to offer her, the quiet between them felt heavy. The desert was vast, but the weight of their silence made it seem even bigger. After a long stretch of tense travel, they finally came to a rocky overhang that would shield them from the worst of the wind. Rico dismounted quickly, his body aching from hours of holding Kaya and riding. He carefully lowered her to the ground, her head lolling slightly. He could see the exhaustion and pain in her face, the fever still burning her skin. Rico set to work quickly, grabbing the last of his water from the canteen and using it to dampen a cloth. He pressed it gently to Kaya's forehead, trying to ease her suffering. As he worked, his thoughts drifted back to the past few days, the decision he had made to help her, despite the consequences. As he wiped the sweat from her brow, Kaya's eyes fluttered open, and she met his gaze. She looked up at him through a veil of exhaustion, her voice weak but clear. Why did you save me?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper, but the question hung in the air like a heavy weight. Rico paused, his hand stilling over her forehead. He had been dreading this question, the one he knew would come eventually. It was the question that forced him to confront everything he had been taught, everything he had believed. He sighed, sitting back on his heels. "I don't know," he admitted, the words tasting strange on his tongue. "I just couldn't leave you there. You weren't supposed to die out here." Kaya's eyes softened, but there was still that look in her eyes. Uncertainty, confusion. She seemed to be processing his words, her mind catching up with the moment. After a long pause, she spoke again, her voice tinged with the weight of a truth she had carried with her for years. "My people, they left me behind," Kaya said softly, her eyes drifting to the ground. "I wasn't meant to survive. They said I was weak, a burden." Rico's heart clenched at the rawness of her words. He had always known that the Apache were a fierce people, but hearing Kaya speak of her own abandonment, it shook something deep within him. No one, no matter what side they were on, deserved to be left to die alone. "You're not weak," Rico said firmly, his voice more certain than he felt. "You're alive, and that's all that matters." Kaya's eyes met his then, and for the first time, Rico saw something different in her gaze, something softening, a crack in the walls she had built around herself. She hesitated for a moment, then spoke, her words almost like a confession. "The attack. It wasn't just an attack," Kaya said, her voice growing steadier as she continued. "It was a betrayal. Kyle, he's my cousin. He wants to be the leader of our people. He thought my father, the chief, was too weak. He orchestrated the attack to kill me, to make it look like I was a casualty of war." Rico froze, his hand hovering in midair. He couldn't believe what he was hearing. The story Kaya told wasn't just one of survival. It was a tale of political intrigue, betrayal, and power. "The chief, your father," Rico murmured, trying to process what she had just revealed. "He doesn't know." Kaya shook her head, a dark shadow crossing her face. "No. And if Kyle finds out I survived, he'll make sure I never get the chance to return to the tribe. He's already convinced them that I'm a liability." Rico sat back, the weight of the truth crashing over him. The situation was far more complicated than he had first realized. It wasn't just about saving an Apache girl anymore. It was about saving the heir to the tribe, a leader in the making. But there was more at stake here than just Kaya's life. Kyle was dangerous. Rico had no doubt that the betrayal Kaya spoke of was only the beginning. If they didn't find a way to stop him, it would cost them both far more than they were ready to pay. "Then we have to get you somewhere safe," Rico said, more to himself than to her. His voice held a newfound determination. Kaya nodded, her eyes searching his face. There was something in her gaze now. Trust, maybe even a little hope. But Rico knew it wouldn't be enough to shield them from what was to come. "We can't outrun them forever," she said softly. "But if we can make it back to the mountains, I might be able to find a way to stop Kyle." But I can't do it alone. I need you. Rico's chest tightened at her words. He had never imagined that a simple act of mercy, helping an enemy in need, would lead him into something so much bigger than he had ever expected. But now, he couldn't just walk away. He had chosen to fight for her future, and for a chance to change the course of history. "I'll help you," he said firmly, his voice low but resolute. "We'll do this together." And just like that, in the middle of the desert, amidst the rawness of betrayal and survival, Rico knew that the path ahead would not be easy. But it was the only one worth walking. The fire crackled softly as Rico sat back, watching the flames dance in the cold desert air. Kaya lay beside him, still feverish but alive, and for the first time since he'd taken her from the battlefield, Rico felt a fragile sense of relief. She was still with him, still breathing, but the journey ahead was far from over. The desert night was quiet, too quiet, and Rico's thoughts weighed heavy on him. He had made a choice, but that choice had brought him to the edge of something far larger than he had ever anticipated. Kyle and his followers were out there, hunting them like animals, and every minute they spent here, in this makeshift camp, brought them closer to being caught. Rico turned his attention to Kaya, who was still unconscious, her body a ghostly presence beside the fire. Her chest rose and fell with every shallow breath, the sweat on her skin shining in the firelight. She was alive, but barely. His heart clenched as he thought of what she had revealed to him earlier. The betrayal from her own family. The political game that was being played at her expense. She had been abandoned, left to die in the desert by those she called kin, and now she was in his care. He hadn't asked for this. He hadn't asked for any of it. But here he was, sitting beside an Apache girl, holding the fate of a tribe in his hands, and trying to make sense of it all. "You're a damn fool, Rico," he muttered to himself. He'd never thought of himself as someone who made decisions based on sentiment. He was a cowboy, a man of action, not thought. But now, with Kaya's life hanging by a thread and the future of the Apache people at stake, he couldn't help but feel the weight of what he had done. A sudden movement from Kaya broke his thoughts. She shifted slightly, her eyes opening just a crack, her lips parting in a low, pained gasp. Rico immediately moved to her side, kneeling down and gently supporting her. "Easy now. Don't try to sit up," he said softly, his voice soothing but full of concern. Her dark eyes blinked rapidly, trying to focus on him. She was still groggy, still disoriented, but there was something in her expression, something different. Trust. "Rico," she whispered, her voice hoarse. "You didn't leave me." He nodded, his hand gently brushing her hair away from her forehead. "I couldn't leave you, Kaya. You're not alone anymore." Her lips parted, as if to speak, but she winced in pain, and Rico immediately quieted her with a gesture. "Rest. We'll talk later." Kaya didn't argue, her eyes closing once more as she sank back into unconsciousness. Rico remained by her side, his thoughts scattered as the fire burned low. He had made a promise to himself to keep her safe, and now it seemed like the world was conspiring to make that promise as difficult as possible. But there was something inside him, something that wouldn't let him turn back. He wasn't just saving Kaya anymore. He was becoming part of something bigger, something beyond his control. Kaya had revealed the truth to him. The attack on her was not a random skirmish. It was a planned betrayal, orchestrated by Kyle to take her place as the heir to the Apache tribe. And that meant that the hunt for her wasn't just personal, it was political. The entire Apache world would turn upside down if Kyle succeeded in killing Kaya. Rico clenched his fists, a deep rage building inside him. He had heard enough about Kyle from Kaya to know that the man was ruthless, ready to do whatever it took to take power, even if it meant killing his own kin. And now, Kaya was in the middle of it, caught between family loyalty and survival. Rico didn't know what the future held for them, but he knew one thing for certain. He wasn't going to let Kyle win. The next morning, after a restless night filled with the constant fear of being discovered, Rico gathered his belongings. He couldn't stay in one place for too long, not with Kyle and his men on their trail. Kaya was still too weak to travel far, but he couldn't afford to waste time either. He gently woke her, helping her sit up as best he could. She winced in pain, but to his relief, her fever had broken, and she seemed more alert than the day before. "We need to move," Rico said, his voice steady. "Can you ride?" Kaya nodded weakly, though her face was pale, her body trembling from the exertion of just sitting up. Rico didn't push her, but he could see the determination in her eyes. She would fight through this, just like she had fought through everything else in her life. With great care, he helped her onto Dust Devil, ensuring she was steady before mounting up behind her. It was going to be a long ride, but the mountains were their best chance at finding safety. If they could make it there, they could regroup and plan their next move. As they rode through the rugged terrain, Rico kept a sharp eye on the horizon, his hand never straying far from his rifle. Every rustle of leaves, every distant sound had him on edge. They weren't safe yet. But with each mile they put between themselves and the ambush site, Rico felt the weight on his shoulders lessen just a little. Rico wasn't sure what would happen next. He didn't know if Kaya's people would accept her, or if the tribe would turn its back on her in favor of Kyle. He didn't know if he could protect her from what was coming. But as he rode beside her, feeling the warmth of her body against his, one thing became clear. He wasn't just her protector anymore. He had become part of her fight. And for the first time in his life, Rico Lacey found himself fighting not just for survival, but for something much bigger, something worth risking everything for. The sun was just beginning to rise over the jagged peaks of the Dragoon Mountains when Rico and Kaya reached the edge of a small canyon. It was a place Rico knew well, a hidden spot that offered shelter and safety, if they could get there without being spotted. They had ridden for hours, the terrain growing rougher and the path steeper. Kaya had remained silent for most of the journey, her body weak but her spirit unbroken. Rico could feel her leaning against him, her exhaustion weighing on her. But there was also something else: determination. Kaya hadn't given up yet, and neither would he. They made their way deeper into the canyon, the shadows growing longer as the sun continued its ascent. Rico's eyes scanned the surroundings with caution. He had no illusions that they were safe, not yet. But the canyon was narrow and winding, a natural maze that could confuse even the most skilled trackers. They reached a small grove of trees by the base of a cliff, and Rico halted Dust Devil. The area was secluded, hidden from view, and there was fresh water nearby, a stream that bubbled up from a hidden spring. It wasn't much, but it was enough for now. Rico dismounted and helped Kaya down from the horse, his heart heavy with the knowledge that she was still too weak to do much on her own. She stumbled slightly as she landed, her legs unsteady, but Rico caught her gently, holding her up until she regained her balance. Kaya looked at him with those same dark, tired eyes. "Thank you," she whispered, the words soft but filled with meaning. Rico simply nodded. "Rest for now. I'll keep watch." But as he spoke, something in the distance caught his eye. A figure emerging from the trees, moving cautiously toward them. Rico's hand instinctively went to his rifle, but before he could make a move, the figure stepped into the clearing. It was a man, middle-aged, wearing the traditional garb of an Apache warrior. His face was weathered and lined with age, but there was something familiar about him. His eyes, the way he carried himself. Rico's heart skipped a beat. "Kaya," the man said softly, his voice deep and calm. "It's me, Chateau." Kaya gasped, her eyes widening in recognition. "Chateau," she said, her voice shaking. "How did you find me?" Chateau smiled, though his expression was tinged with sadness. "Your father sent me," he explained. "He knew what Kyle had planned. He feared you were in danger." Rico felt a weight lift off his shoulders as he saw Kaya's face light up. For the first time since they'd met, she looked genuinely relieved. She moved toward the man, her steps shaky but faster than before, and embraced him, her arms wrapped tightly around him. "The chief knew?" Kaya asked, her voice full of disbelief. Chateau nodded. He knew. He also knew that Kyle would stop at nothing to take the leadership for himself. "But your father wants you to return. He wants to make things right. The tribe needs you." Rico watched the reunion in silence, feeling like an outsider to this world. It was clear now that Kaya wasn't just any Apache girl. She was the heir to the tribe, the one who could bring change to her people. And here he was, a cowboy, caught in the middle of a battle he didn't fully understand. But even as he thought about his role in all of this, he couldn't ignore the stirrings of something deeper inside him. He had promised to protect her, and that promise was more than just survival. It was a bond, a connection that had been forged through shared pain, loss, and the desperate need for something more. Kaya turned back to him, her face full of gratitude. "Rico," she said, her voice soft but steady. "You saved my life. I don't know what I would have done without you." Rico shook his head, a small smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. "I didn't do it for thanks. I did it because because you deserve a chance. Chateau studied him carefully, as if weighing his words. You've done more than you know, he said slowly, his eyes narrowing slightly. The chief will be grateful for your help. But you should know that helping Kaya isn't just a favor to her. It's a favor to the entire Apache people. Rico felt a strange tightness in his chest. He hadn't thought about it that way. But as he looked at Kaya, now standing tall with Chateau's support, he realized that he wasn't just helping one person. He was part of something bigger, something that could change everything. Chateau motioned toward the trees. Come with me. The chief is waiting for you. We need to make a plan. Kyle and his men won't stop until they have what they want. Kaya nodded, her resolve hardening. I'm ready, she said, her voice firm. I'm going back, to face them, to take my place. Rico glanced at her, surprised by the certainty in her voice. Are you sure? He asked quietly. This won't be easy, you know. Kyle won't just let you walk in. Kaya met his gaze, her eyes unwavering. I'm not walking in, Rico. I'm going to fight for what's mine. For the first time, Rico saw the leader in her, the strength that had been buried beneath the weight of her past and the pain of betrayal. She wasn't just a girl running from her tribe. She was a warrior, ready to claim her future. He didn't know what the next step would be, but in that moment, he knew one thing for sure. He was going to help her fight for it. The sun had dipped low in the sky by the time Rico, Kaya, and Chateau reached the small Apache encampment nestled at the base of the mountains. It was a place that felt almost untouched by time, simple, yet full of life, with warriors and families gathered around their fires, sharing stories and food after the long day's work. But there was no peace for Kaya. As soon as they entered the encampment, her presence caused a stir. The air was thick with suspicion and whispers. Most of the tribe had believed her dead. Her disappearance had been seen as the final chapter in her life. But now, standing before her people, Kaya was no longer the girl who had been left to die. She was the future, the one who would reclaim her place as the rightful heir to the tribe. But reclaiming her place wasn't going to be easy. Rico watched as Kaya straightened her back, standing tall and proud despite the exhaustion still etched on her face. She was no longer the fragile girl he had carried through the desert. She was something else now, someone ready to fight for her future. We need to speak with my father, Kaya said, her voice filled with purpose. It's time to end this. Chateau nodded, his expression hardening with determination. Your father will want to see you, Kaya, but you must know this will not be easy. There are many who still follow Kyle's vision, and they will not accept your return without a fight. Kaya's gaze hardened as she looked at Rico. I didn't survive the desert just to give up now. I'm going to fight for what's mine. Rico had always believed in fighting for what mattered, but he couldn't help but wonder how far Kaya was willing to go. This wasn't just a battle for her life anymore. This was a fight for the soul of her people. As they approached the center of the camp, Rico felt the weight of the situation pressing down on him. He was just a cowboy, one man caught between two warring worlds. He had helped Kaya because he believed she deserved a chance. But now, in the face of what was coming, he didn't know if his efforts would be enough. They entered the chief's tent, where Kaya's father, Chief Kuchis, sat waiting. The old chief's eyes were sharp, his face carved with the wisdom of many battles. But there was a weariness in his gaze, one that told of years of conflict and loss. "Father," Kaya said, her voice unwavering as she stood before him, "I'm here to take my place." The chief looked at her for a long moment, his eyes scanning her face as though he could see everything she had been through. "I see you've come back to us," he said softly, his voice filled with emotion. "But you've come back to a broken tribe, Kaya. Your cousin Kyle, he's not a fool. He's a dangerous man. And he has followers who believe in him. If you think this will be an easy road, you're wrong." Kaya didn't flinch. "I know what's at stake, Father, and I'm ready to fight. I didn't survive the desert just to let Kyle take everything from us. He will not lead us into war. We have a chance to change everything." The chief was silent for a moment, then sighed deeply, looking at Rico, who had remained quiet at the back of the tent. The tension in the air was thick, and Rico could feel the weight of the chief's scrutiny on him. "I owe you my daughter's life," Chief Kuchis said quietly. "But you must understand something, cowboy. This is Apache business. If you are to be part of this fight, you will face the same dangers as anyone here." Rico nodded, meeting the chief's gaze. "I'm not afraid. I'm here because I made a promise to Kaya." The chief studied him for a long moment before finally speaking. "Then let it be known. If you stand with her, you stand with the Apache. But you will fight as an Apache, not as a cowboy, and you will be tested." Rico's heart pounded in his chest, but he didn't hesitate. "I understand." The chief nodded, his expression solemn. "Then prepare yourselves. Tomorrow we march to face Kyle and his followers. The time for talking is over. We fight for our future." Rico felt the weight of the moment settle on him. Tomorrow was the day. Tomorrow they would confront the enemy and everything would change. But as he looked at Kaya, standing beside her father, he knew one thing for certain. This was the fight worth dying for. The day came swiftly, and with it, the weight of inevitable confrontation. Rico could feel the air in the Apache camp grow thicker as they prepared for what was to come. Kaya stood with her father, speaking with the warriors, rallying those who still believed in her leadership. The camp was a hive of activity, and though the preparations for war had begun, there was a noticeable undercurrent of uncertainty. Rico, watching from the sidelines, couldn't help but notice the division among the tribe. There were those who stood firm behind Kaya, those who had witnessed her strength, her resilience. But there were others, those who had followed Kyle, who regarded her with suspicion and resentment. He had known from the start that this would be a battle of more than just weapons. It was a battle for hearts and minds. Kaya's journey had been one of survival, but now it was a journey of leadership, and that burden weighed heavily on her. She was not just fighting for herself anymore. She was fighting for her people, for a future where her tribe could be whole again. Rico approached her as she stood with Chief Kuchis, her back straight, her face set in a determined line. Her eyes met his, and for a moment, the chaos around them seemed to fade. "You ready?" he asked, his voice quiet but full of purpose. Kaya gave him a small nod. "As ready as I'll ever be." She was wearing the traditional garb of an Apache leader now, the weight of the past and the future settling on her shoulders. There was no trace of the fragile girl he had first found in the desert. This was the leader, the warrior who had come back to claim what was hers. But as much as Rico admired her strength, he could see the quiet fear in her eyes. It wasn't the fear of battle. It was the fear of losing. Not just the fight, but everything she had worked for. And it was that fear that made her stronger, because she wasn't fighting for victory alone. She was fighting to save her people from the destruction Kyle would bring. "I'm not sure I can do this, Rico," Kaya confessed in a whisper as the warriors gathered nearby. "What if they don't listen? What if I fail?" Rico reached out, placing a steady hand on her arm. "You won't fail. You've already done the hardest part. You survived. And now, you're leading. They'll follow you, Kaya. You are the future." Her eyes softened at his words, and for a moment, Rico saw something in her, a flicker of hope. It was the same hope that had kept her alive when everything else seemed lost. And that hope, he realized, was contagious. It was the glue that would bind them all together in this fight. But as the sun dipped lower in the sky, a new sound reached their ears, the sound of horses. The Apache warriors stopped in their tracks, their heads turning toward the horizon, where a group of riders was coming into view. Rico's heart sank. He knew who it was before they even arrived. Kyle's men, they came into the camp with arrogance and hostility, their eyes hard, their faces set in grim expressions. At the head of the group rode Kyle, his tall frame towering over the others. He wore the same contemptuous look Rico had seen before, and when his eyes locked onto Kaya, that look only deepened. "Kaya." Kyle's voice was cold, cutting through the tension in the camp like a knife. "I should have known you were still alive. The coward's daughter who would rather hide than lead." Rico bristled at the insult, but Kaya stepped forward, her gaze unwavering. "I've come to take what's mine, Kyle. The people won't follow you into the abyss of war. I will lead them to peace." Kyle's lip curled into a sneer. "Peace. You are nothing without my people. I am the leader of the Chiricahua now, and you—" He stopped, his eyes scanning the camp. "You've lost. You've always lost." Kaya held his gaze, but Rico saw the slight tremor in her hands. This was the moment. There was no going back now. Kyle was everything she had feared, power-hungry, ruthless, and determined to tear her down. But Kaya wasn't backing down. "I won't let you destroy what my father fought for," she said firmly, her voice ringing with authority. "You won't take this tribe with lies and betrayal." Kyle chuckled darkly. "You're too weak to lead, and now I'll have to prove it." Rico stepped forward, his hand still on his rifle, but it wasn't the gun he needed. It was his words, his presence, the trust that Kaya had placed in him. "You don't get to dictate who leads here, Kyle," Rico said, his voice low and dangerous. "The people will decide. And right now, they see you for what you are, a man driven by greed and hatred." Kyle's eyes narrowed, and he gave a sharp nod to his men. The tension in the air crackled, the scent of battle close. But before the situation escalated, Chief Kuchis stepped forward, his voice calm but authoritative. "This ends now," Kuchis declared, his eyes flicking between his daughter and his nephew. "Kyle, you've lost the tribe's trust. It's time for you to leave." Kyle's eyes burned with fury, but there was no denying the authority in his uncle's voice. With a final sneer, Kyle turned his horse and rode off, his men following begrudgingly. As the riders left, Kaya exhaled deeply, her shoulders slumping with relief. "It's over," she whispered. Rico didn't speak right away. He watched as the last of Kyle's men disappeared into the distance. The fight for leadership settled, but not yet won. But in that moment, Kaya had proved something vital. She had faced her fears, stood against her own blood, and had led the tribe forward. She was no longer the daughter of a chief. She was the chief. The morning after the confrontation with Kyle, the atmosphere in the Apache camp was different. There was no sense of triumph, no victory dance. The battle had not been won, only delayed. The people of the tribe stood divided, and Rico knew that just one defeat could cause the unity Kaya had worked so hard to build to collapse. But she wasn't backing down now. Rico watched as she moved among the warriors, speaking with them, listening to their concerns, answering their questions. Her father, Chief Kuchis, stood nearby, his expression inscrutable. Kaya's determination had brought the tribe back from the brink, but it wasn't enough. She still needed to prove herself, prove that she could lead. For Rico, it felt like a different kind of battle. No longer was he just a man helping a girl survive the desert. He was a part of something larger now. And as he stood at the edge of the camp, watching Kaya work, he knew that this fight was far from over. "Kaya's doing well," Kuchis said, approaching Rico, his voice steady but laced with concern. "But Kyle's still out there, with those loyal to him. If they want war, they'll take it to us. You'll need to be ready for what's coming." Rico turned to face the chief, nodding. "I'm ready. But she's ready too. She's been through too much to let this go now." Kuchis gave a slow nod. "She's strong. Stronger than I was at her age. But leadership isn't just about strength. It's about trust and respect. The people must see her as their leader, and they will, if she shows them the right path." Rico could see the wisdom in Kuchis's words, but it still didn't ease the weight in his chest. Kaya was up to the task. He knew that. But this wasn't just a fight for her future. It was a fight for the future of the Apache people. Everything they had was on the line. Later that afternoon, Kaya gathered the tribe's warriors in the center of the camp. The air was heavy, thick with anticipation. The time had come for her to make her stand. Rico stood at the edge of the crowd, just behind Kaya, his eyes scanning the faces of the warriors who had come to listen. Some were skeptical, others uncertain, but the murmurs of dissent had quieted, and there was a sense of resolve in the air. Kaya had already earned the respect of some, but now she needed to win over the rest. She stepped forward, her voice strong but calm. "My people, I know the weight of what I ask of you. I know that many of you have followed Kyle. I know that I am not the leader my father was, not yet. But I am the leader you need. I am the one who will lead us to peace, to a future where our people thrive. We have no future in war, no future in hatred, but we do have a future in unity." Her words were simple, but they cut through the silence like a blade. Kaya's eyes swept over the crowd, meeting the eyes of each warrior as if to silently say, "I am with you." The power of her words was undeniable. This was more than a declaration. It was a call to action. A murmur rippled through the crowd, and for the first time in days, Rico felt a glimmer of hope. Maybe, just maybe, they could win this fight. But it wasn't just about words. It was about what happened next. As Kaya continued to speak, her voice growing steadier with each passing sentence, Rico's thoughts drifted to the future, a future where she would lead and he would stand by her side. A future where the Apache people could finally break free from the cycle of violence and pain. And though he wasn't Apache, he had found something here, something he hadn't even known he needed: belonging. When Kaya finished speaking, the camp fell silent. The warriors looked to one another, the weight of her words hanging in the air. Rico could see the uncertainty in some faces, but there was something else too, a flicker of belief, of trust. Then, the first warrior stepped forward, a tall man with long braided hair, the markings of a seasoned fighter etched into his face. His eyes met Kaya's, and for a long moment, neither of them spoke. Finally, he nodded, his voice low but clear. "I follow you, Kaya," he said, his words carrying the weight of a leader's blessing. One by one, others followed, slowly at first, but then with more conviction, the warriors pledged their loyalty to Kaya. The tide was turning. Rico could feel it in his bones. But even as the warriors rallied behind Kaya, a shadow still loomed. Kyle and his followers weren't far behind, and there was no question that they would come for the tribe again, this time with everything they had. The following days in the Apache camp were filled with preparation, tension, and uncertainty. Kaya had earned the trust of her people, but the battle was far from over. The weight of her newfound responsibility was evident in her every movement, every word she spoke to the tribe, every decision she made. It was as though the future of her people rested on her shoulders. Rico watched her from the sidelines, his own thoughts heavy. Kaya was leading, but she was still healing, not just physically, but emotionally. The wounds of betrayal ran deep, and Rico could see that no matter how strong she appeared on the outside, there was still a part of her that had yet to heal from the scars of the past. As the days passed, Rico made it his mission to stay by Kaya's side. He had made a promise to protect her, but now, as the tribe prepared for the final confrontation with Kyle, Rico realized that it wasn't just her physical safety he had to watch over. It was her heart, the fragile, broken part of her that had been abandoned by her family and by her people. One evening, after a long day of strategizing and preparing for battle, Kaya sat outside her tent, staring at the horizon as the sun dipped below the mountains. The camp was quiet, the warriors resting before the inevitable battle the next day. Rico approached her slowly, quietly, and when she saw him, she didn't turn away. Instead, she motioned for him to sit beside her. "I don't know if I can do this," Kaya admitted, her voice barely more than a whisper. "I've never wanted war. I never asked for this. I just wanted to be with my people, to make things right." Rico sat beside her, watching the distant sky. "You don't have to carry all of this on your own, Kaya," he said softly. "You've already proven more than enough. You're not alone in this." Kaya's eyes drifted to the ground, and for a moment, Rico thought she might say something more. Instead, she remained quiet, her shoulders slumped in a rare moment of vulnerability. "I've lost so much," she said, her voice cracking slightly. "My family, my tribe, my future. I don't even know who I am anymore. I'm not the person I used to be. I'm someone else. Someone who has to fight for everything." Rico reached out, placing a hand gently on hers. "You're not alone anymore, Kaya," he repeated. "You've got me, and you've got your people. You're stronger than you think." There was a long pause before Kaya finally spoke again, her voice quieter now. "What if I lose? What if I'm not the leader they need? What if I fail them?" Rico's grip tightened around her hand, and he leaned closer. "If you fail, we all fail. But you won't. You're not just fighting for your future. You're fighting for theirs too. And they know that now. They trust you." Kaya's eyes met his, and there was something in her gaze, a flicker of hope that had been missing for so long. "I don't deserve this," she whispered, almost to herself. "You do," Rico said, his voice steady and reassuring. "You deserve this more than anyone. You've fought for your survival, and now you're fighting for your people. You're the leader they've been waiting for." For the first time in a long while, Kaya allowed herself to breathe. The weight of the world didn't feel so heavy. Not because the battle ahead would be easy, but because she finally felt like she wasn't carrying it alone anymore. As the night stretched on, Kaya and Rico sat in silence, the fire crackling between them. Rico knew there was still much to be done. Kyle's forces were still out there, ready to strike. But for now, there was peace, a fragile peace, and he would hold on to it for as long as possible. Tomorrow, they would fight. But tonight, Kaya had found something she hadn't had in a long time: hope. And it was enough to carry her through the coming storm. The morning of the final confrontation arrived with a chill in the air. The Apache camp was bustling with activity, but there was an uneasy silence that hung over it. Rico watched as Kaya moved through the camp, giving orders and speaking with the warriors. Her determination had only grown in the days since her declaration of leadership. but the burden she carried still weighed heavily on her. Rico stood at the edge of the camp, watching Kaya from a distance. He had seen her go from a girl on the run, lost and alone, to a woman ready to lead her people. And now, as the final battle approached, he could see the fire in her eyes, the same fire that had burned within her when he first found her in the desert. She had come a long way, but the road ahead was still uncertain. He wasn't sure how much he had to offer her now, aside from his presence, but he knew one thing. He would not let her face this fight alone. As the warriors gathered, the tension in the air thickened. Kaya stood before them, her back straight, her face set in a mask of determination. Rico could see the way the warriors watched her now, their respect for her evident. She had earned it, not through words, but through action, through the sacrifices she had made and the courage she had shown. "I know what's at stake," Kaya said, her voice steady and clear, carrying over the crowd. "This fight isn't just for me. It's for all of us. We fight not just for our survival, but for our future. For the future of the Chiricahua Apache." Her words were simple, but they rang with the truth that had taken root in the hearts of the people around her. The warriors nodded in agreement, their resolve hardening. They were ready. Rico watched from the side, his heart pounding in his chest. He had heard her speak before, but now, as she spoke to the warriors, he saw the change in her. She wasn't just a leader because she had been born into it. She was a leader because she had earned the right to be one, and he had no doubt in his mind that she would lead them to victory. The warriors mounted their horses, ready to move out, and Kaya turned to Rico, her eyes meeting his. "Are you ready?" she asked, her voice steady but with a hint of vulnerability. Rico nodded, his heart swelling with pride for her. Always. They rode together, side by side, as the sun rose higher in the sky, casting its light over the land. The road ahead was uncertain, but for the first time, Rico felt a sense of peace. Kaya wasn't just fighting for herself anymore. She was fighting for a future she would create with her people, and he would be there to help her build it. As they approached the battlefield, the tension was palpable. The sound of horses' hooves echoed in the distance, and Rico could feel the adrenaline surge through his veins. This was it. This was the moment that would define them all. They reached the ridge overlooking the valley where the final battle would take place. Below, Kyle's forces were already gathering, their numbers overwhelming. But Kaya didn't falter. She took a deep breath, her eyes focused on the enemy below. "Today we end this," Kaya said, her voice full of resolve. "We end it for our people. We end it for peace." The warriors behind her raised their weapons in silent agreement, the weight of their loyalty to her heavy in the air. Rico felt a surge of respect for the Apache people, for how far they had come, and for how far Kaya had taken them. In that moment, he realized that this battle wasn't just about survival. It was about changing the course of history. Kaya was not only fighting for her life, but for the future of the Apache nation. She was leading them toward a new dawn. With a final nod from Kaya, the charge began. The day of the final battle arrived with the first light of dawn casting a cold glow over the valley. Kaya and her warriors rode down from the ridge toward the approaching forces of Kyle. There was no turning back now. The air was thick with tension, but Kaya's determination was clear. This wasn't just a battle for survival. This was the moment she would claim her future and lead her people to a new beginning. Rico rode beside her, his heart pounding, but he felt a strange calm in his chest. Kaya had proven herself to be a leader. She wasn't just fighting for her own life, but for the survival of her people. And now, he would stand by her through whatever came next. As they reached the battlefield, the two forces collided in a deafening roar. The Apache warriors charged forward, the sounds of battle filling the air. Rico fought alongside them, his instincts guiding him as he moved through the chaos. But his eyes never strayed far from Kaya. She was at the front, leading with authority, moving through the enemy ranks like a force of nature. Rico saw how the warriors followed her without question now. They believed in her. The fight was brutal, but there was no turning back for anyone. The Apache people were done running from their past. In the heat of battle, Rico found himself face to face with one of Kyle's men. They grappled briefly, Rico using his speed to disarm him and take him to the ground. But he didn't kill him. He let the man go, just like Kaya had shown him. Mercy, the strength of mercy, not violence, was the true power they needed. As the battle raged, Rico's eyes caught a familiar figure on horseback. Kyle, looking down at them from the crest of a hill, his eyes burning with fury. He was no longer leading a charge. He was retreating, trying to escape the inevitable. But Kaya wasn't running anymore. With unwavering focus, she spurred her horse forward, cutting through the chaos, her eyes fixed on Kyle. He drew his weapon, aiming it at her as she charged, but Kaya didn't flinch. "Kyle," she called out, "it's over. You've lost." Kyle sneered, pulling his sword, but Kaya's warriors moved in, surrounding him. The last of his forces fell back, and the battle came to an abrupt halt. Kaya approached Kyle, standing tall as she faced the man who had betrayed her. "You will not take this tribe into war," she said firmly. "Not now, not ever." Kyle's lips curled into a bitter smile. "You think you've won?" he hissed. But there was no fire left in his eyes. He was done. With a final glance at his defeated forces, Kaya turned away from him, and Rico watched as she made her way back to her people, her head held high. She had won not just the battle, but the future of her tribe. And Rico, standing beside her, knew that this victory was not just for her, but for everyone who had been waiting for this moment. As they rode back to camp, the sound of hooves echoed through the valley, signaling the end of the conflict. They had fought not just for survival, but for hope. And now, with the enemy defeated, Kaya's leadership was cemented. The Apache people would finally be free from the cycle of violence. And Rico realized that he had found something in this fight too. Not just a sense of belonging, but the deep, unwavering belief that love and hope were the true weapons that could change the world. As the dust settles and peace finally finds its way to the Apache camp, we're reminded that even in the darkest times, hope can light the way. Kaya and Rico's journey wasn't just about survival, but about healing, forgiveness, and finding family in the most unlikely places. Their story is a testament to the power of love and resilience that transcends all barriers. If this tale touched your heart, we'd love to hear your thoughts. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share. And, as always, leave your thoughts in the comments below. We look forward to hearing from you. The day of the final battle arrived with the first light of dawn casting a cold glow over the valley. Kaya and her warriors rode down from the ridge toward the approaching forces of Kyle. There was no turning back now. The air was thick with tension, but Kaya's determination was clear. This wasn't just a battle for survival. This was the moment she would claim her future and lead her people to a new beginning. Rico rode beside her, his heart pounding, but he felt a strange calm in his chest. Kaya had proven herself to be a leader. She wasn't just fighting for her own life, but for the survival of her people. And now, he would stand by her through whatever came next. As they reached the battlefield, the two forces collided in a deafening roar. The Apache warriors charged forward, the sounds of battle filling the air. Rico fought alongside them, his instincts guiding him as he moved through the chaos. But his eyes never strayed far from Kaya. She was at the front, leading with authority, moving through the enemy ranks like a force of nature. Rico saw how the warriors followed her without question now. They believed in her. The fight was brutal, but there was no turning back for anyone. The Apache people were done running from their past. In the heat of battle, Rico found himself face to face with one of Kyle's men. They grappled briefly, Rico using his speed to disarm him and take him to the ground. But he didn't kill him. He let the man go, just like Kaya had shown him. Mercy, the strength of mercy, not violence, was the true power they needed. As the battle raged, Rico's eyes caught a familiar figure on horseback. Kyle, looking down at them from the crest of a hill, his eyes burning with fury. He was no longer leading a charge. He was retreating, trying to escape the inevitable. But Kaya wasn't running anymore. With unwavering focus, she spurred her horse forward, cutting through the chaos, her eyes fixed on Kyle. He drew his weapon, aiming it at her as she charged, but Kaya didn't flinch. "Kyle," she called out, "it's over. You've lost." Kyle sneered, pulling his sword, but Kaya's warriors moved in, surrounding him. The last of his forces fell back, and the battle came to an abrupt halt. Kaya approached Kyle, standing tall as she faced the man who had betrayed her. "You will not take this tribe into war," she said firmly. "Not now, not ever." Kyle's lips curled into a bitter smile. "You think you've won?" he hissed. But there was no fire left in his eyes. He was done. With a final glance at his defeated forces, Kaya turned away from him, and Rico watched as she made her way back to her people, her head held high. She had won not just the battle, but the future of her tribe. And Rico, standing beside her, knew that this victory was not just for her, but for everyone who had been waiting for this moment. As they rode back to camp, the sound of hooves echoed through the valley, signaling the end of the conflict. They had fought not just for survival, but for hope. And now, with the enemy defeated, Kaya's leadership was cemented. The Apache people would finally be free from the cycle of violence. And Rico realized that he had found something in this fight too. Not just a sense of belonging, but the deep, unwavering belief that love and hope were the true weapons